How did the First World War affect the heroic ideals of the 19th and early 20th centuries? One way of exploring this question is to look at the posters used to encourage men to enlist. Such posters served a utilitarian purpose, to make enlistment attractive, but ideas of heroism facilitated these aims. This study is most useful in the case of Britain, which had a volunteer system of enlistment. In France and Germany, conscription meant that all men of a particular age group served in the armed forces without the need to bring cultural pressure to bear. What story do British recruiting posters tell us about understandings of heroism? Early posters show the continuing dominance of 19th century ideals, as can be seen in this image of George and the Dragon. Here, a figure from a traditional national myth, imagined in terms of chivalric ideals, is cast as heroic. His actions are individual and demonstrate physical courage. This narrative of heroic war service was not only evident in depictions of men fighting, it can also be seen in the use made of women in the recruiting effort. This often took the form of moral blackmail, as can be seen here. In this poster, the individual courage of the soldiers, figures made small by perspective, is not as central, but the importance of defending domesticity is very clear. Men are being encouraged to go to war in defence of the women who, in their dress and location, are clearly placed in the home that they also embody. Chivalry, the defence of the vulnerable, is once again at play in defining heroic behaviour. This narrative changed dramatically, however, in 1915. The Secretary of State for War, Field Marshal Lord Kitchener, seen in this poster, might seem to embody 19th century ideals of heroism, being a recognised hero of an imperial campaign and bearing the title Lord Kitchener of Khartoum. Here, however, he sends a very different message about what makes a war hero. In the early days of the war, Kitchener believed strongly that his greatest challenge was a shortage of military manpower. In August 1914, he was almost alone among the country's principal soldiers and statesmen in predicting that the war would be a protracted and costly business. Supported by Field Marshal Douglas Haig, who named a figure of 1 million as a recruitment goal, Kitchener led a campaign of mass mobilisation. The recruitment drive was initially successful, with 462,901 men enlisting in September 1914. By February 1915, however, the number of recruits per month had fallen to nearly 88,000. At the same time, the need for military manpower was becoming ever more clear as the British Expeditionary Force dug in along the Western Front, and the global nature of the conflict involved British and Imperial troops serving in campaigns on nearly every continent. The British Armed Forces could not be selective about who was recruited or deter potential recruits. The result was a series of images in which the central figure, far from being identified as an individual of rank, was portrayed as any and every man. Kitchener appeals to all Britons, identifying them clearly as the viewer of the poster. The potential soldier, and therefore potential hero, is implied rather than shown. Similarly, in this poster, the message is once again that anyone can be a hero if they can wear the uniform. It is the uniform that is heroic, rather than the man wearing it. All soldiers are in this war heroes, and it was the manpower shortage, rather than the horror of the Western Front, that was key to this shift in the imagery of heroism. As the war progressed, those wearing soldiers' uniforms no longer necessarily had to be combatants. Many posters recruited for specific branches of the armed forces, including this one for the Army Ordnance Corps. The men in this image are represented as physically fit, but they are doing non-combatant work rather than carrying weapons. Their heroism is in their service rather than their willingness to fight. At the same time, the list of types of men being sought as recruits emphasizes the extent to which anyone, no matter what his civilian identity, could achieve a role in war through enlistment. To be a hero, one had to be a soldier, but to be a soldier, one did not necessarily have to be a combatant. However, perhaps the most significant change in poster images as representations of heroism is the emergence of recruiting posters aimed at women. The woman in this poster is shown as an enthusiastic worker. The focus is on her cheerful face as opposed to the physical strength of the men in the Army Ordnance Corps poster. Yet the underlying message was very similar. In aiding the war effort in a uniformed role, women could be wartime heroes just as men could.